Hello and welcome back to Harlan is in Danger. I'm your host Tom, and today I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Mitch.
Hello, I'm also here. And the roles are reversed. It's very strange, but we adapt.
I was like, I know I do it for the card review videos now, but I was like, wait, do I do that for the retrospective? Because I looked
You don't
also,
have to. You can just throw it back to me. I don't care.
yeah, but we didn't talk about it beforehand, and then I just started talking, so now we're here. Anyway, we're doing our Scarlet Keys retrospective video today, so we're going to be talking about our thoughts on the campaign, the individual scenarios,
Mhm.
the way our decks performed, and then kind of going into what we're going to be doing next on the channel. Um,
Yeah.
First things first, what'd you think of Scarlet Keys playing it this time?
It was not as much fun as the first time,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still fun, and I still think that people underrate it. I still think it's a fun campaign. But
Yeah,
it did lose just a little bit of luster for me because the first time was fun, like exploring the city and like discovering or the globe and discovering all the little nooks and crannies. And this time, it felt like we were pressed for time a lot, and we also had a lot of things going on in our personal life, so there were a lot of interruptions.
yep.
And it was also very tricky to figure out how to play it, like digitally. This is a much easier campaign to play with physical components, which I think we both learned. So there were a lot of like things working against it, but it was still fun in the end, I think.
Yeah, I actually had more fun with this campaign than the last time. But this is not a hard bar for
Good.
me to clear because the last time I just didn't finish Scarlet Keys and decided, no, even though that I'm recording these videos and putting them up online, I'm not gonna finish. I don't like this. I'm not having fun. This time I had fun, so that's
Wow.
good.
What do you think changed between the two?
I think I was playing with a less restrictive card pool, weirdly, even though we're doing
Hmm.
progression challenge. And I think like I just had a better understanding of what the Scarlet Key scenarios were going to be asking of my decks. Um, and even though I played a Mystic Fighter, and those are not the best, and even though we ended up not like getting a actually particularly positive ending, I think I had a lot more fun responding to the Scarlet Keys in a way that it wanted me to. So I felt like I was more engaging with it on its terms instead of trying to make my own kooky ideas work too much, and it worked.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I definitely liked our team. I think our team was really fun, even though it was kind of inefficient on the killing side of things. But I mean, it was still cool to see like use the axe and see how the customizable cards pulled their weight. I actually felt like customizable cards did a pretty good job. I had a much more positive take on them this
Yeah,
time around.
yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm actually since this run actually kind of did change my mind a little bit on customizable. I am not. I was not a huge fan of them. Um,
Same.
I kind of thought like, why don't you just design more cards and make things more difficult for us as players? Uh, when they were first announced. But this time I was like, you know what? I'm actually having a lot of fun with this. I do understand their strength of being like, you can take this card, but kind of use it in different ways. Um,
Hmm.
and they're still not like a catch-all, I think, which was kind of nice to see. Like Runic
Yeah.
X will still have the same kind of limitations, I think, regardless of how you customize it. It's just you can customize it to fit an Akachi better than a Mark, or a Mark better than an Akachi, which was cool.
Right. Hmm. Well, and I also feel like damning testimony was a big highlight for me. It was a little tough to trigger because I didn't always have an enemy on the table, or the enemy was in a location that I didn't care about. Um, but that kind of made it like a fun mini game that I think sometimes interacted with the other players, but not always. Where I was just kind of thinking about where the enemies show up. I would definitely add kicking the hornet's nest to any deck that's using damning testimony because I feel like you just want enemies on the table,
Hmm.
so that way you can use it and get all your benefits from it. So yeah, and it felt like basically because I was building sort of around the customizable card, I think that helped me have more fun with it. I don't think customizable is something you could just and maybe I'll throw a customizable card in my deck. Like, don't do that. I don't think that will be very fun because they just necessitate so much experience. So essentially, I would have the customizable card, I would put a little XP into it, and then I would go to my other cards, buff them up, and then when I felt like I was in a relatively stable state with my deck, I would go back to my customizable, and then like, okay, let me now improve this element, the kind of core essence of what the deck is trying to do. And so the two kind of like the deck and the customizable card were speaking to each other. It's just that like the customizable card, I think, takes a huge precedent over the direction of your deck because
Yeah.
you are investing so much into it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's like a dark horse, right? And people love dark horse. Dark horse is just like, oh, when you put that in your deck, it just determines everything else you're going to be doing
Yeah.
with the rest of the deck. So, yeah, so they were fun. That was definitely a big highlight. And I know that's like the player cards, but I mean, I figure I don't want to get into all
Yeah.
my
Well, we'll
favorite parts of the individual scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can talk about player cards in this as well. We were like one of the benefits of playing progression is that we are unlocking these player cards as we go through the campaign as well.
Yeah.
So there were moments where we were like, "Oh, we should have taken Kicking the Hornet's Nest. Ah, we didn't have it at level 0. You could have adaptable it in, but like that's still like part of the conversation, I think." So yeah,
That is a good point because this is the first time we did that in Progression Challenge where we had a fragmented card pool
yeah,
that we specifically dictated at the start of things. And that kind of limitation, I think, was interesting. And it sort of harkens back. Like, it really does feel like playing through a campaign when you're getting a pack one at a time,
Yep.
and then you get new player cards and you go, oh, I want to add this to my deck. Ugh, but like my deck's already going in a direction. This does not fit it.
yeah,
Or this is like 0 XP, so I don't want to pay for it. Those kinds of decisions. So,
yeah.
not that like I love that space, but also it's like it is Arkham flavored, so
Yeah.
it's a nice feature to try once in a while.
And it's I like that we have done the work so that we can play it
Yeah.
that way. Like that was kind of I'm really like I think
Yeah.
if I'm very glad we did it in advance, like because we've already done this with Edge of the Earth, and I think we're scheduling a time to do this with Hemlock Vale pretty soon.
Mhm.
But having had put these together, these packs together beforehand, was a lot of fun. To, instead of just being like, oh, I can take any of these cards because we started the campaign, be like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I was definitely looking ahead and being like, oh, there's a card that I want to play with in this deck. How much time do I have to wait until I can play with that card? Should I just run around this between these two scenarios so that like I can stall to get that card before we play this next scenario? It was a really
Right.
fun experience actually. So
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I like that we associated it with the calendar
Yeah.
because every time you hit that calendar marker, the status reports, you get that nasty cultist token in the bag. But then it's like you get a card pack
you get
to go
cards.
with it.
Yeah,
So
it's nice.
it's not so bad.
It's not too bad. Yeah. Generally something bad happens and then you get some cards and it's like cool. That's actually why I play Arkham.
Right? Yeah, so that was a fun trade-off that I think was unexpected. I wasn't really thinking of it in those terms, but it worked out.
Yeah. I will say some things I didn't really like about Scarlet Keys and still don't really like about Scarlet Keys. Concealed and Hollow are kind of, I think, like my least favorite like campaign-specific mechanics.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And maybe that's a little bit of this playthrough trying to do it digitally while recording, coloring that, because we just kind of ran out of space to put our hollowed cards. And
Yeah.
Concealed is a bear, especially on Octagon, which doesn't give you the options to just kind of like freely create decks and shuffle them at your pleasure, basically. There were a
Yeah.
lot of moments. I think since you were doing like the actual recording, I was doing a lot more of the behind the scenes scenario maintenance, where I would just be like dragging cards one by one out of one little bin that Octagon gives us, so I could shuffle some other cards together in there, and it was just like tedious. And it kind of reminded me that like when we did play this physically, concealed cards, hollow cards, are just kind of tedious to me. Like I don't hate hollow cards like that much. It's just that they're just put in a separate out of play area that's not removed from the game. And like I feel like I
Yeah.
have no counterplay besides what the campaign gives me to that mechanic, which is like fine, but also kind of annoying.
Yeah, I would add to that the hollowed cards, especially when I'm playing, because like even if you're playing with physical components, a lot of times my board space gets filled up like completely with just cards and junk and tokens.
Yeah.
And the fact that the game is like, well, there's another separate area, so it's not your deck, it's not your discard pile, it's not your play area, it's
It's
not your
not your
bonded
out of
cards,
play area. It's a
it's not
separate
your out of
out of
play.
play area. Yeah, that was
It's
that.
just like, oh my god.
Uh,
Okay.
and we're back.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Me eyes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the out of play areas, as if we needed more of those. And also, I just don't feel like the mechanic does anything. It's just, and I mean, there was obviously instances where it took a card away from me that was like very helpful, but you may as well have just discarded it or something like that. And I get like survivors can get it back or whatever, but I just feel like it was this like, let me take away your card. And
Hmm.
sometimes it hurt, but then you just use different cards. Like you're supposed to build your deck under the assumption that you might lose some of your cards. So
Yeah, yeah, and I think that was like, I think they recognized that in the design, and then they started putting out like treacheries or enemies that attacked you if you had more than a certain number, or did damage to you if you had more than a certain
right.
number of hollow cards, which was just like, I don't know. It was like, okay, this is fine, but also like I don't really feel like I have control over that. It feels very lucky, like just a it's luck
Yeah.
whether or not I
It's
pass
just a
these
timer.
tests or
Hmm.
and like I guess it's okay as a timer, but it's also I don't know. I wish I had some level of control or it wasn't a separate out of play area. Like if they had just had it so like when you try and get cards back from your hollowed area, it's just like you can return a card removed from the game. Probably would have broken the game, but also would have been kind of more interesting to
Mm.
engage with where you could potentially have cards. You'd play see more play of cards that do remove themselves from the game because you can get them back from hollowed and it gives a little bit more lore as to like what this outside realm is and where
Yeah.
these one per game effects happen that remove themselves from the game. I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
it probably is not balanced to do anything like that, but it is kind of interesting to think about like what happens if we combine the hollowed area with just your out of play area. Um,
Yeah. I mean, they could also just put them in the shadows and
they had the
do more
shadows
elaborate things
right
with that.
there. You're right.
Well, okay, so yes, they do, but I think they didn't do that because they were thinking to themselves, well, the shadows is like the courtier, like
Yeah,
spies.
yeah.
They don't know how to control this stuff, so why would the cards go there? And it's
But
like,
it's
yeah, I get that thematically
that's
that doesn't work, but also it's the part the investigators don't know, so it's the
Yeah,
shadow.
yeah. I think like that would have been okay. I don't know. I think that would have been okay. I don't think that would have. I think that might have been a little bit like a disconnect, but also like I don't know. That's kind of cool, and it's also another like area you have to designate. The shadows is another area you have to designate for space on your table, and I think
Yeah.
that like just can. So our boards on the virtual tabletop got very cluttered by the end of this campaign because we had keys that were given to us, story
Yep.
assets that were just put into play by the game.
Yep.
We had hollowed areas, we had the shadows, and we had these big, not big sprawling maps, but bigger maps that would come into play in some of those scenarios, and it just
Yeah.
became such an overload of information. Um, and I think that was my difficulty, and that's kind of where my frustration with this campaign comes into play. Is there's just so
Okay.
many moving pieces. In general. And I don't want to harp on it too much because I actually really enjoyed it this time. I liked the difficulty. I
Hmm.
like that if you can see all those moving pieces, you can usually like find a way out. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes I feel like a dum dum because I didn't look at my key or I didn't look at a card in the shadows and see, oh, that's my ticket out of this situation
Yeah.
because there's so much you can do and it's just a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say, as like in terms of the other mechanic though, the concealed cards, I actually like that mechanic quite a bit. And so I think that's part of my motivation of like, we'll just pair them together, like lean into it
Yeah.
more and then do more interesting things with it. I think that's where that motivation comes from. Because the concealed thing I think is interesting. I like that you just test the shroud value of whatever you're doing. And if it's just like a 1 point of damage or one clue, you just replace it with
Yeah.
revealing a decoy. And I do like the mystery of like, is someone there? Or like, you duck around a corner and then it's like, oh shoot, it was an illusion, or like it was, they got away. And
Yeah.
so I thought that mechanic is fun. I do think there's certain scenarios where it gets to be a little much, and then it's like, here's 12 concealed cards in one location, and you're like, seriously? Like this is just impossible now.
Yeah.
You've made the situation like so insurmountable. And like I guess that's our fault for not staying on top of it, but sometimes you just can't,
Yeah.
and you're doing your best. And I don't think the game should allow, like, location should probably have a cap of like, you know I don't know,
Clue
one
value.
more than the number of investigators in the
Or
game for
one
how
more
many
than the
decoys
number
would
of
be there.
clues on that location or something like that. One more than the number of
Yeah,
clues would be
something like
something good
that.
like that. Yeah. So that like you can
Yeah.
have like these really shadowy areas because they're big and full of clues, but sometimes that's I don't know.
Right.
It's a difficult thing too because it's also just kind of a random. And again, I agree with everything you're saying like thematically about the shadows and
Okay.
concealed. They're really cool. It's just that when the most you can do to that mechanic within the confines of like deck building is one concealed card per action or one concealed card per ability, that can very
Mm,
quickly get out of hand and you can't really do anything to get out of it. Right? Like
yeah.
that's the difficulty, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I know people get really confused with the rulings on concealed as well. There are some. I think a situation came up once where I did get very confused, and I was sort of like, "Whoa, how does this work?" It's like I don't understand this mechanic at all.
I remember that
But apart from
conversation.
that, like what's that?
I think I remember being a part of this conversation because I don't think I had the answer either, but I think we were trying to puzzle it over it together.
Yeah, I don't remember which scenario that was, but I do remember the situation coming up and then being like, "Oh, you're right. This is very confusing." But on the whole, I don't think it's that confusing. Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh!" And
Yeah,
it's like, just do an action. If anything, I just forgot. Like, I forgot to use Finn's ability to just take my extra action to
yeah,
evade. I mean, you might as well try. And when I started remembering doing that, it was a lot more fun, I think, dealing with them, because I was like, hey, if I don't have an enemy this turn, my bonus action actually doesn't go to waste. I can actually
yeah,
use that
yeah,
to at least take a shot, and maybe I can figure out who's doing what because I'm just that fast.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that is cool. And like
Yeah.
I like that there is like a certain evaluation of investigators that would do good in Scarlet Keys. Like Roland does good because Roland kills a guy and can
Yep.
discover a clue. And even if there's not a clue there, now you can flip over a concealed card. Or Trish does
Right.
good because uh, Trish can discover an additional clue after she discovers a clue, right? Like, and
Hmm.
if there's only one there, that's not gone to waste. You can still use it to flip over a concealed card. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do like that aspect of it. And I think concealed, yeah, again, it's like a cool mechanic. It's just it's not capped, and there's not a lot you can do as a player to cap it.
Yeah. And then it also is just like one portion because, like you said, the other mechanic, this whole hollow thing, is like this separate other thing that we have to make note of.
Yeah.
And I think I would probably be in favor of just wipe those cards, forget it, just go all in on the concealed. And like I get it, the hollow cards are there because it's the paradimensional element. And it's always, it seems like in a lot of these campaigns, they want to have like, oh, there's like opposing forces and you're like caught in the middle. And
Yeah.
I just don't feel like that's super necessary. I don't know. I guess I'm in the minority on this, but like, because I also think the final scenario just does not need to be like the big reveal of what the paradimensional things is. I think it should just be a mystery. It's just a mystery. We don't know what it was. There was like maybe like a clue or a hint of what could have been there, but then we just like don't address it. And really, you're just addressing the Codier and like whether or not you join forces with them or you know take them down as part of the Foundation, and then you can question your ethical decisions within that.
Yeah.
I think that makes for plenty interesting dynamic interplay of interactions, but like the paradimensional one, because I think it gives it starts to deflate it is what it does. Is it wants me to like be invested in something totally unrelated, because like at least like I forget about it. Like the shadow cards, the Codier, they have these mini cards that are really cool.
Yeah.
They do like things that are unique to the game, and the hollowing is like something that's already been happening in the game. It's just calling it hollowing, and so it just feels like this annoyance. It doesn't feel like this like that's happening. I lost my gun. Oh no, it's got warped into another reality. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I guess I will say like that is a good way to like get us to like a new mechanic. Is give us some new bits to play with, like because I like the concealed cards as a physical component, and I like that I can just kind of play with them. And I mean, even though I didn't like them as much when we were playing digitally, we did put them into the end of our Dream Eaters campaign as just a way to like get some extra guys, right? Because it was just like, oh, cool, new things we can play with.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like, I think, I don't want to go too much into the final scenario. I think we're going to talk about that when we talk about the final scenario. But I guess the one last thing I want to respond to on Scarlet Keys before we move on, is there's a lot of the tendency in these campaigns to have it between like two opposing forces, and the investigators have to like choose sides. I think that actually works though, and the problem is that this is technically between three opposing forces. You have the Coterie, you have the Foundation, and then you have this weird. So it's like it's trying to give us a little bit of a twist with like, but actually there's a secret third faction, and you're like, I mean, yeah, but I didn't. Okay, that's fine. I thought whatever, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, even compared with, like, Carcosa, and I know you and I don't like that one quite as much, but even in that, the presence of, like, Haster and the King in Yellow and the sort of weird cerebral situations you're ending up in feels like a constant, ever-present threat throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
Like, it's very closely connected, and you are invested in what's going on there, and, like, the whole like bit about are you just insane gets to be a little much for us, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. But
it is still like fittingly with like it's like, is Haster really getting to you? Is the King in Yellow like driving you crazy as you're going through the plot? So there is some credibility as to like why that's happening. It's not like this where it just feels like shoehorned in. I guess they just didn't. It's just when those treachery cards come up and they hollow something, you basically are just like, all right, whatever. You could just have this card.
I think you're 100% right that it's like it doesn't have. It's not something new, and it doesn't feel like something new. So that when we hit that last, or maybe the secret scenario has something to do with this. Full disclosure: never played the secret scenario. Maybe like if it did something besides just like you remove your card from the game, like if they went to the shadows, or if they went to some other like thing, or somehow like the other enemies got to use your cards or something like that, some other way in which
they gain intelligence on you or what you're doing, that would be cool.
Some other way in which this like thing happened, instead of just removing cards from the game, we would be like, oh, what's going on with this? This doesn't seem like the Foundation or the Coterie doing it. This seems like something else. But instead we're just sitting here being like, why are the Coterie taking our cards? I guess that's fine. I guess Dunwich took my cards and I didn't really know why. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't like that mechanic in Dunwich either. That's like a big knock against that campaign in recent memory. Yeah. I mean, I still like Dunwich, but and it used to be like among my favorites for a super long time, and then in this most recent playthrough, I just get so irritated at the constant discarding that I'm like, all right, I can't stand this mechanic. It drives me nuts. I built my deck. I want to play it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Speaking
But anyways,
of
I
building
guess we
our
should jump into.
decks, I got a perfect segue. You ruined my segue. let's
I'm
go
always doing that. Sorry.
Let's go ahead and talk about our decks. All right. Don't disappear, Tom. Cool. All right. So here's our finished decks. We have my Akachi deck over here, and then we have your Finn Edwards deck over below it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to highlight in your Finn Edwards deck? I know I put my deck on top, but that's because I copied the slide over from Dream Eaters, and there were more purple cards in the deck that was on top of that slide.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fine. We could start with either deck first. I don't think I have too much to say about mine. Famous last words. I'll say that Key of Ys is not nearly that good. It's not worth 10 XP for sure. And it did not like blow me away like so many people seem to think it does. And I think that reputation has like sort of been tempered over time.
Yeah.
I get that it is strong and it like maxes out your stats in a really potent way, but it only works in that broken sense if you're playing somebody like Agnes, or because she can take Peter Sylvester to soak horror for days, and then she can just take the Forbidden Knowledge and then dump the rest of the horror onto Key of Ys so that she maxes her stats and then she has Peter. But like even if you did that, that's a lot of XP investment, and you may as well have just gone down so many other different directions with Agnes that are perfectly viable as well.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it like destroys the novelty of playing Agnes just because she can, execute it effectively. So yeah, that's like a big one I wanted to comment on. Is I just Key of Ys, it's fine. It's a perfectly fine card. I mostly I would have to dig for it, which was annoying. I couldn't find it, and then when I did get it on the table, I couldn't take any horror for some reason. It was just so difficult to get horror on it. So then it was like this card that I spend 3 resources, all this effort, I get nothing for round after round after round after round. And then eventually it would start to pay off at like the very end of the scenario. And so it just did not feel super worth it to me. I'm glad I tried it, but yeah. I don't think I have too much else. I think I already gave my thoughts about Damning Testimony, so go ahead.
Yeah, I liked that you played Treasure Hunter. I thought that was kind of cool to see that card perform a little bit better. And it was like, it
wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad, honestly. I think like one of the things that both of these decks struggled with was doing the thing that we built them to do primarily with the low stats that we had them at. So, but I think like actually seeing Treasure Hunter show up and be like, you actually have, you were very much demonstrating like rogues can generate a lot of money and pay for the Treasure Hunter for when you need it. And like I liked seeing that card kind of show up and be more of like an event that happens to your deck instead of like an asset that's supposed to stay in play for a very, very long time. I liked the kind of like, I guess...
Don't be married to him.
Yeah, the transitional nature with which you played Treasure Hunter. Of just being like, I'll get through this high shroud location and then I will let you go away. Goodbye, friend.
Yeah, I liked him too because he was also like a ton of soak, and so it was nice to just throw him down and be like, okay, I don't have to worry about getting hit because he could just tank all of that. Yeah. And sometimes he did. He would just be like take a massive hit and then die, and I'd be like, all right, get out of here. Like I'll figure something else out with the rest of my plans because now I'm getting my money back. So I'm not too bothered by it.
It's kind of like I had that similar thing with. I mean, I've had this with David Renfield for a long time, but it's one of those things where if like you can engineer a reason for your enemies or your allies to just die, like I'll get some more money, or maybe we won't advance the agenda early. Like that actually feels really good because then you're like, I can take this attack. I can actually do something productive. That the game is trying to hit me, but instead I'm like, no, you're actually hurting yourself.
Yeah.
That was cool. And you had Karen Zobel the entire game, and you didn't die.
And I did not die. I think that was in part because Finn Edwards is a much, much better investigator than Leo Anderson. He is significantly more powerful.
It's kind of strange that that's happened, actually, because I remember when I first picked up Forgotten Age, I was like, I can't get Finn to work. This is like such a limited card pool. And like Leo Anderson was just like, yeah, you're solid. You can get an extra action to play allies if you have the money for it, basically, but they don't provoke attacks of opportunity.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Finn's high intellect and high agility and that bonus action to evade. I mean, I like cautious characters. I like characters who have a built-in ability that's like very preemptive.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the bonus action to evade is very appealing to me because it's not risky. It's not like Skids where it's like, well, let me spend some money. I mean, Skids isn't necessarily gambling, but he's taking a chance to do something more with his turn. So it has to be worth more than getting 2 money.
Yeah.
So, there is kind of like this risk reward component, but with like Finn, it's like you take an extra shot to evade to make sure that you get out of trouble, and so there's like a safety precaution in that, and so that's really appealing to me, and I liked that quite a bit. I think he's a really strong investigator. His low willpower does bite him a little bit, so you do want to move quickly. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
But even then, like in the moving quickly bits, there was definitely a lot of scenarios. Like this is probably the first campaign that we played through in this progression challenge where I felt like I was playing a very competent investigator and had a very strong deck. I mean, apart from Stella, that also happened with Stella and Forgotten Age.
Yeah.
So those are like the first two where I'm like, whew, like those stick out in my mind as like, yeah, I was killing it with those decks. They were very strong investigators. They had a lot going for them. So yeah, it was kind of refreshing to do something that was just like competent. I mean, and his weakness did nothing. His weakness did nothing the whole campaign.
Didn't it bite us
so
once?
Weird.
No, it didn't because it was only hunter enemies, right? Like I was like,
yeah.
no, we're in trouble, and then you're like, no, it doesn't have hunter, and I was like, oh.
It's so weird because I keep reading the card and going, oh, it's gonna be bad, it's gonna be bad. Something bad's supposed to happen when you draw this card, and it never did.
Yeah, you got kind of off scot-free with your weakness. Because then what was your... Oh, no, drawing the sign was your actual random basic weakness. That one didn't let you off scot-free.
Oh, gosh, I forgot. We do have to talk about drawing the sign. Yeah, because I didn't mention this before, but the drawing the sign, that card single-handedly is what, like, hurts my overall experience of playing this campaign and why I didn't have as much fun. It was that freaking card. Because it would just show up so often and so early, and I didn't want to take the time to get rid of it, or I couldn't. And then I would just, I had all these cards to just draw and draw and draw, and then I couldn't do that because then it would just go to waste. And so it was just this like, I felt like I played the entire campaign with 3 cards in my hand almost the whole game, which it was crazy to see Finn pull ahead in a lot of respects, but there were also instances where I'm like, like I could do this if I could just get a few more cards in my hand. So yeah, that card pissed me off, and I just, it's like I almost can't even look at it.
I remember, like, I think it was like after it was right before Dead Heat. You were like, I just have to pivot the way I'm building this deck because drawing the sign is hurting me too much, and I don't want to draw cards. I don't like doing it anymore because I always drawing the sign after getting a full hand, and then I just have to discard 5 cards. And I was like, man.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your deck. Let's talk about a fun deck.
My deck was fun. I had a lot of fun with my deck, even though I got a weakness that I always get in Mystic Fighters, and I was very worried about hurting me, but apparently I just didn't have the draw to deal with it that often. One of my favorite moments in this campaign was when we were in the casino playing with Austin, and they... I drew self-destructive, and they were like, here, I'll just take care of that for you. And I was just like, wow, this is great. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this deck. I think this is like the first time that I've put Mind Wipe in a deck and didn't use it once because I just didn't really need to. The axe was pretty efficient at dealing with enemies that needed to be dealt with immediately, and then enemies that I didn't deal with immediately usually didn't have effects that I was like, I need to cancel this. So I was sitting on Mind Wipe a lot, considering whether or not I should play it, and then being like, ultimately, I don't think I need to. Except in the last scenario, which is good because I think most of the enemies we fight in the last scenario were elites, and Mind Wipe would have done nothing.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't probably say enough great things about Runic Axe. That card is a powerhouse. And I think it's appropriately costed to take up 2 hands, because I always forget that. It looks like something you could just single hand, but like just God of War style. Yeah. But you really can't. You need both hands because it's, I don't know, it recharges itself, and then you get to imbue these different inscriptions, and a lot of them are pretty potent, and then you stack them up, and you can do some real damage with it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely an MVP card this campaign for sure,
And I
and it
had
worked
it
really well with I think with.
every
Okay.
game, like second or third turn, I think was the latest that I drew it, and I was just like, oh, this is perfect, nice. Um, a couple other MVPs that I do
Yeah,
want to point out. Blood Pact did a ton of work. Love you, Blood Pact. Um,
yeah, it did.
and then actually Living Ink in the earlier scenarios did a lot of work too. I didn't upgrade Living Ink once. I just used it as like a zero cost. This boosts your fist for 3 turns.
Mm.
And that was honestly kind of enough, especially dealing with like those early concealed cards. Just
Hmm.
in conjunction with the axe, just hit a decoy away or two.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because Living Ink seems like it's a little bit exceptional among how you would build your deck because it boosts your stat or stats. And so if you want to like lean into that and have it determine the entire course of your deck, you actually have to put in a lot of XP because you need its charges to last a much
Yeah,
longer period of time and it needs to boost more stats. So it's kind of like that's also maybe I guess another way to look at some of the customizable cards is like they don't always necessarily dictate your deck, but it's if they do, then they will in a very noticeable way, and
yeah,
if they don't, then it's like they will once you upgrade them, in which case they're going to cost a lot of XP. So there's like because like I don't know, a couple into Living Ink I don't think would have changed much for you, but like you know just the fact
yeah,
like you said, just give me a fight boost for a little bit
yeah.
makes sense.
I think that was ultimately like the decision I made after like the second scenario. I decided like okay, I do want to spend my XP in a couple different places, and I feel like
Hmm.
if I'm gonna put any XP into Living Ink, I need to put more than just a little bit, um, in order to
Yeah.
make it like a centerpiece of my deck. And I don't think this deck has a centerpiece like really has a centerpiece piece besides Runic Axe.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually, I think it kind of got to Empty Vessel, but we'll talk about that the one time I played it this campaign. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like this was just a pretty like decent deck. I think ultimately, um, due to just some really mean tokens in the last couple scenarios, it started to fall off. But I felt pretty good with it most of the time. I felt like I was pretty capable of doing damage. So much damage, in fact, that I could heal the enemies sometimes so I could heal myself, and
Yeah.
that felt pretty good. So
Yeah. Well, and you had Song of the Dead in there. That did some work.
it did no work, really. But at least I didn't expect it to this time. Like it did a couple ping damages one here and there. I don't think I drew a skull on it once instead of only when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was oddly nicer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at least it was a charge battery, but
Yeah,
about it.
it really like was good. I maintain that it was good for this deck. I maintain that I was taking too much horror to
Yeah.
run shriveling. I needed charges for my angered spirits because I had to deal with those a lot more than self-destructive, and it's
Hmm.
cheap. And this deck was kind of expensive, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think it was still well chosen. It just had that moment that shows up where you're counting on it to do something that it can't do, and you really need it to,
not that
and
it
it's in
can't
play, and
do,
it
that
just
it
can't.
won't do.
Yeah, that it won't do. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Empty
then
Vessel was cool, but it showed up kind of late.
yeah.
So yeah, I felt a little. It felt like we were cheaped out a little bit. We didn't get to see it fully
I will talk
come
about it
together.
when we get to that scenario, but that's the only scenario where it's like even was a thing, and it really shined in that scenario, so that's good.
Yeah. Hmm. A little bit of confusion whether or not you could recharge it. I think.
So I did actually go into the rules. You can move charges to assets that don't use charges. That is an established rule that has an FAQ dedicated
Interesting.
to it. It's just that they won't always do something. The fact that Empty Vessel doesn't have uses charges doesn't mean we can't
Doesn't mean
move
you can't
charges to
have.
it. It
Okay.
just happens to use charges without saying uses charges.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
That makes it really good for Akachi then.
it was really
That's
fun.
really
Yeah.
cool.
Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about some individual scenarios. So the first one we have up is Riddles in the Rain, which I think is a really good starting scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked Riddles and Rain. I liked it before. I liked it this time. It's got a weirdly harsh spike at the very end. It's just like you're plodding along, and then it's like at the very last point
Yeah.
there for some reason. So that part I'm still adapting to a little bit because I keep wanting to play that scenario and think to myself, oh, this is a good like deck test scenario, and I think it's a good deck test scenario for the rest of the Scarlet Keys campaign,
Yeah.
but maybe not like anything else.
Yeah, it definitely has like it has a different arc than I think a lot of the Arkham scenarios that came before it have. There's some that I think
Mm-hmm.
it might have some in Hemlock Vale. I want to play them a little bit more that have a similar arc of like we're kind of plodding along and then oh my god what's happening, like the very rising
Mm-hmm.
tensions of scenarios. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I really like this. I think it's a really great introduction to Concealed. I think it's
Yeah.
I didn't think about it as an introduction to Hollowed, but it probably does that too. Does it? I'm not really sure.
Maybe it hollows. I don't remember.
I don't really remember either.
It's a very fun, moody scenario, and I
Hmm.
think it sets an extremely good tone for the campaign. Um, yeah, like I honestly don't think I could say enough good things about it, quite honestly. Like just in terms of its design
Yeah.
and its place in the campaign, it fills some very important like roles in the story and in all the, design elements they want you to pay attention to. I really like it. It's always a fun one. This is one that I think would be really fun to play in solo as well. If someone just wanted to fire up a random scenario, I'd be like, yeah, Riddles and Rain is great. Let's do
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, and it does have like the indication of a tone if like you're doing some hey, what campaign do you want to play? Oh, let's just play like the first scenario of a couple scenarios. Like this one tells you, I think, along with like Innsmouth and Forgotten Age, this is what the campaign's going to be like. Um,
Yeah.
whereas I think there's a couple other campaigns like Dunwich, Carcosa, honestly, probably Edge of the Earth, where if you play the first scenario, you're just like, I'm not really totally sure what's going to happen here. I think I have an idea,
Yeah.
but I'm not really sure yet. Circle and Dun's another
Yeah,
one.
that's fair.
Um,
It's good to acclimate players.
yeah,
This one.
it really is like a good, this is what you're going to be dealing with if you play this campaign scenario.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have much more to say about it. Eye of Ravens is the most
do I.
basic key you could have,
Nah.
and you get it
Yep.
at the end of this, so that's cool. All right,
Yep.
let's just move on. So on Thin Ice,
That's it.
I think this is my second favorite scenario in Scarlet Keys. I almost said my favorite, but it's not because we'll talk about that one later. But this is a great scenario. I love Thorn as a character. I liked them as a friend the first couple times I played through Scarlet Keys, and I like them even more as our rival. Because,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was fun thematically, but I don't know how much I'd want to piss off Thorn again because it just felt like it gave us nothing but bad outcomes
Oh, yeah.
because we did that.
this is
Well,
yeah.
I didn't
Spoilers
wanna
for the
reason
rest
with
of the
that
campaign.
jackass,
This is the turning point of the campaign, and yes, it is scenario 2. Why do you ask?
Yeah. Yeah, I like On Thin Ice. It's a great scenario. It's a lot of fun. I don't think I would want to do it quite so early
Yeah,
again. I don't think there was much of a benefit in doing that. Maybe that's just because we sabotaged ourselves by beating Thorn up, but
it definitely was a very different campaign when you beat up Thorn because we didn't engage with like half the scenario. We just took a key and left, and that like, which is like
yeah, exactly.
it was which
It
was
just wasn't worth it. We just left.
it was so cool that it allowed for us to have that arc of just being like, we found the key.
Yeah.
There's someone else here. We're gonna smash and grab, and then get out of there. And like, there's a whole giant monster in that scenario that we just were like, no, 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 no. You deal with that. We're gonna leave with this key.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool that it lets us do that. And it fit with our kind of bootlegged background of characters where we were just, I like the idea that we were kind of thugs or criminals of some sense and just didn't care about making friends with Thorn. Just, hey, he's got one of the keys. Take him out. Get the key.
Yeah.
Like you said, smash and grab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, it was a lot of fun though. There are bears,
Yeah.
and they're scary, and I like scary bears. I like that they're just bears too. I like kind of how grounded
Straight up
this one
bear.
is if you just don't pay
Yeah,
attention
yeah.
to the giant monster that shows up at the end.
Well, I'm okay with the giant monster at the end because, you just avoid him if you leave early if you
Yeah.
want, but also it escalates,
Yeah.
starts grounded, and then gets crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very cool one. I really liked this one. I don't have too much to
Hmm.
say about it because like the actual mechanics of the
Likewise.
scenario we just didn't really engage with.
Yeah, we just ignored it.
Yeah.
Just
Oh well.
went and left. Winner take all.
And I think the next scenario, Sanguine Shadows, we also had a very similar experience of like we didn't play the
Yeah.
latter half of the campaign. This one not because we were doing so well, but because we were doing pretty bad.
So we were not doing bad. It's just that I was almost dead, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to take the chance to keep going and get killed by Sharon Zobel. So this was like, I accept full responsibility that the reason why we didn't do better on this one was because of me and not packing enough like protection to stay alive with Sharon Zobel in play. So I should have planned more for that. But that said, because like we were on top of her, like we hunted down Carmen San Diego. We were ahead. We were one step ahead of her for most situations, and it kind of sucked that we didn't get like a better result from her
Yeah.
because we didn't get to the second half. We had to ditch out early, but
Yeah, this was
whatever.
I think also just I think we probably should have done Dead Heat before this one, because I think this would have been a lot different if we could heal. And I also
Yep.
think I probably should have just told you my plan for the deck that I'm building is to use the Last Blossom to heal us, because you, I'm gonna let you take full responsibility for us not getting a better result in this scenario. But I definitely was like, oh man, I'm taking a bunch of damage. I'm taking a bunch of damage in horror, and I don't have that piece that lets me heal that damage in horror off myself yet.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if,
Yeah. Because you weren't in great shape either. I mean, you
uh,
could have lasted much longer, but still, yeah.
yeah, I still had some pieces to heal, or not to heal, but to survive a little bit longer. But I think it just
Hmm.
became like without you, because you were providing 4 of our 7 actions a turn to do concealed cards basically, and without that, I was just
Yeah.
like, I mean, I can swing the axe at some shadows, but that's all I really got.
Yeah.
And I think I drew like that card that was like if you expose an enemy, it attacks you or something like that. I don't really remember. I don't remember what
Hmm.
card I got, but there was a card that I was like, I got one more turn in me, and then I didn't find her, and I was like, well, never mind, goodbye.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that. I actually like the inclusion of the police in this scenario as well. I
Hmm.
mean, it would have helped had we not treated them like, you know, so suspiciously, like we were being, we were real jerks. This was the jerks campaign.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like that they were there as like a potentially, 'cause you had the Codier, you had us as the representing the foundation, and then you had the police who were like somewhere in the middle and not fully aware of the situation.
Yeah.
They were just trying to catch this criminal, and so yeah, it probably would have been helpful had we like allied with them or something like that. But it was fun thematics that they were there. I actually feel like they could have been in the scenario a little more as mini cards or something like that. That would have been cool. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I do agree. I think that would have been cool to just have like a card that represents the police if you don't be a jerk to them. That's just like you can go and they'll help you a little bit by doing some like really basic thing. I don't really know. But
hmm
that would have been
or
cool.
like they revealed like concealed cards, but then like when they do, they take like a damage and then they might die or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been a cool
Be
mechanic.
fun.
It would have been cool to see that tie in. But I mean, I still think the scenario is pretty good without it. It just is like
Hmm.
a little rough that you have to do basically. I don't think you have to do perfect to get the ending, but you have to do basically perfect to get the ending. And I
Yeah.
think once we realized our chances of that were shot, especially without you in the scenario, I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna go for the key. It's fine. We're just gonna deal with
Yeah.
the repercussions. And then like the thing that sucks is when it becomes a net bad, right? Like if you don't get the perfect ending, she's Carmen San Diego, La Chica Roja. Thank you. There it is. Remembering the name. She gets mad at you, and then also the Sanguine Watcher just doesn't like you regardless. So it just becomes like a net negative for your going to the scenario,
Yeah.
which is a little bit rough because it's a fun scenario, but just
Yeah.
unless you do really well, the results are kind of just bad to go there. So that's kind of rough.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Spe-
That you summed up my thoughts perfectly.
yeah, and speaking of scenarios that are just net negatives on your campaign, let's talk about my favorite scenario in Scarlet Keys. Hooray! It's Dead Heat. Oh, I kind of cut off our picture. Oh well. Um, I love this scenario.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, this was fun. This was interesting.
You don't get like rewarded for it besides the key, like for doing this scenario, but oh man, it is so much fun for whatever reason to just go fight zombies in Marrakesh.
Yeah, it was a really fun scenario to play this time. The tension is super, super high in it. I guess the stakes don't feel high though, and that's like the detractor because you're not getting at BP, you're not really progressing the story in any way. It's just can you get the blossom? And that's already been decided before you even enter the scenario. Because we could get the blossom, that's what made it super rewarding to finish. Is that it was like, wow, like we actually saved this person, we stopped the zombie spread, we got the last blossom. It felt like a huge accomplishment in a big way, and like so much of that was just narrative, right? We only got
Yeah.
one card out of it, no XP, no, nothing else that would have assisted us. But that kind of didn't matter because the story resolution was actually really good. I was
Yeah.
really happy that we kind of like saved her and like stopped that horrible situation, as opposed to just getting destroyed by it. What felt like the end of the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely had a change of heart on this one. Playing
Yeah.
through it with you.
I think the story in this scenario is just so good, and it actually feels like. I think there are moments in this campaign where you actually are like, I really am like connecting with one of these coterie members, but this is, I feel like, the strongest one, right? Like, this definitely feels
Yeah.
like if you can get the ending where you actually save the lady whose name I can't remember, Erin, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
that is like such a cool moment where you're just like, she gets out, she's done, she gets to go live her life, and like that feels like a really
Yep.
cool story beat that you just got to institute, and you kind of feel like a hero even though you're literally going around
Yep.
smashing people on the head to steal their keys, and it rewards you for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a heart of gold despite being, thugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, super fun scenario and like really well designed as well.
Oh,
It's very challenging. It's not for the faint of heart. This is not a good like introductory scenario. This is like veteran Arkham fans only.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is one that I'm definitely curious to revisit, whether the key is there or not, just because it was a particularly interesting scenario to play through. Playing through it in solo, I had just such a bad experience because it destroyed me. I could barely move.
Yeah, it does
I think
that.
I moved to like one location and then was like getting killed and then just had to leave. I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't do anything. So that very much coded my experience as it not being very good. But yeah, no more. Say no more. It was a good scenario.
Good. I'm glad I got you to come around on this one because that was like my goal for this entire campaign, and I've won now. I feel so.
You have. Make Mitch like dead heat.
Yeah. All right, next we played Fortune and Folly, and this was
Yep.
2 episodes on the channel. We had my friend Austin come play with us as well, and they played a Calvin deck that was so good at gambling. I don't think they lost a single gambling game. And it was it was like one of my favorite. It was just fun to watch them just be like, yeah, I'll just casually roll up and just win the high rollers table, even though we put in all the. Like, they're playing with all zeros, but it doesn't matter because.
Right. I loved the thematics of it. It was so apropos that Austin decided to play Calvin because Calvin's this character who, his shirt's all like ripped up. He's in dire straits. He's just like lost and abandoned, and then he shows up to a casino and is just mopping the floor with everybody. And all these people are, they're all like posh, and they have like their fur coats and stuff, and they're looking all snazzy. They're like rich billionaires, and then this guy comes to the table and just decimates them. He's just mopping the floor, and the casino just has to like in any realistic scenario, they'd probably be hounding over him to see if he's cheating or not, but it wasn't cheating. He was just super good at gambling.
Yeah, this was just also okay. And then I guess we should talk about the actual scenario. This is just a fun scenario too. Like both parts.
It is good. Yeah, it's really fun.
I was a little concerned, I think, after we recorded the first part, because it took us like the better part of an hour and a half to get it all set up, and I was like, oh man, are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to like, how is this going to feel like playing it separately? Because I think I had to run because personal car stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we came back and it was like, this is still just as fun. And also, Austin still somehow has like all of their luck from the first session we played. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And then,
Really, truly great scenario.
yeah, and then I guess we should talk about this here. We did add both the cards that we got from this scenario into our card pool. There were not any cards in the Scarlet Keys that related to like mechanics that weren't only in the Scarlet Keys that we could have earned. So we're not going to do a XP video for those, but we did get both the Deck of Possibilities and Isamara Ordonez, and we're adding those to our
Yeah.
pool.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when we get to the end, but I figured I should bring it up here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because all the player cards for Scarlet Keys have to do something with like the mechanics in the
Yeah.
campaign, so
Yeah.
they're useless outside of that. So yeah.
We were just like, you know what? Let's let these be as the designers intended them, just in this campaign.
Normally they don't do that. They've been doing it
Yeah,
more often, I
they
think, with the
have
later
been.
campaigns where it's linked to, which makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah, and it's like honestly, probably a cool move to do. I'm not upset about it, even though we have videos where we talk about pricing story cards, and it means we can't do that as much. But honestly, it makes sense.
oh no, can the world go on without those videos?
Yes, it has.
Yes, it can. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Fortune and Folly? Oh, I should probably mention we did make a rules goof because there was a lot going on, and we were supposed to advance an agenda or an act or something, and then it would have changed
Right.
things. But I think it would have been fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that always happens when you
That's-
have to play referee for the game
That's Arkham, baby.
as you're playing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. It was a fun time. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Dancing Mad. Oh, God. My frame rate just dropped like a bunch. Give it a second. All right, there we go. Next up, we have Dancing Mad. So, this... I think this was kind of a weird one to play, because I think we were just, like, killing time at the end here. We were like, we don't quite want to go to just do Tunguska. Let's get one more scenario in. Let's see if we can just go to, I don't know, this one over here.
Yeah.
And I do like, this is like the latest I've ever done this scenario, and I like that we were just ambushed because we came so late. I like that it's not just a couple scenarios that mess you up for trying to play it later. Or I guess I like that there's more than just like one or two. There's like three or four that mess you up for trying to play them later. And then ultimately this was a pretty good scenario. I think we still made it out okay. Our decks were like actually kind of working at this point. I don't really feel like I have too much to say about it though.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this one. I thought it was interesting that we had to take a chance by guessing Desi.
Yeah.
And I was having pretty good luck that scenario, and you were going to lean for one of the cards.
Yeah.
And I told you to go for the other one. And it was just like, I could feel it. It was one of those moments where you're like, I think it's that one, though.
Yeah, yeah.
I was happy to be right. I wanted to be more confident. I wanted to just be like, yes, that's it. I'm on a roll. Just trust my instinct. And I should have just said all that, but I was afraid that it would come back to haunt me if I was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. I was happy
I'm
to
not
be
much of a gambler.
I was happy that happened. That was another one of those on the fly moments where we had to adapt to the fact that we were playing digitally and we couldn't just save a card.
Yep.
So that was the only thing that was a little bit awkward, but I think we made it work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a cool moment. Like if you can get that to work, it's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a fun one to just be running around, and I felt like my deck played really well by the time I got to this scenario. Well, and same with the last one too. It was like Finn's deck had gone into full gear.
Yeah.
And I felt totally capable to just do what I wanted to make it do.
Yeah. Which is like
Apart from, of course, the weakness, the drawing the sign.
And I mean, I think that is like one of the strengths of Scarlet Keys as a whole, is even though it doesn't give you a lot of experience, like it does give you a lot of tools to make your deck just do the things you want your deck to do. And it also kind of gives you a playground to just be like, just go do one of these ones if you want to improve this, or go do this one if you want to improve this. And then we got the key, the Mirroring Blade, I think, from the scenario, which I don't think we really used too much. But it was still a cool
No,
one.
but it was still a cool card. It was a good backup.
Yeah.
In case we needed it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are you ready to talk about the finale?
Let's do it. So we only had 7 scenarios this game. I think
Technically,
that's
we did 8 because
what's
Fortune and
up.
Folly was divided into 2.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm. Okay, your thoughts on Congress of the Keys?
I think this should have been 2 scenarios. And I feel very confident in this. Like, I don't know. I think it's so strange that we have the beginning of one scenario and then it feels like the end of a different scenario. Where you start out and you're
Yeah.
in like the coterie headquarters and they're doing this like vote to whether to exile you or kill you or whatever, and then none of that
Yeah.
matters. Because there's some big bad guys and they take you to a different outsider dimension. And I think the second part of the scenario is cool. I think the first part of the scenario
Yeah.
is cool. I just think there's a tendency in these final scenarios of Arkham, and this is the you were talking about like the 2 factions and being like which one do you choose, is kind of being like a trope that you're kind of getting a little tired of. The trope I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
tired of with in these final scenarios is that they're one setup, something drastic happens, different setup, uh, and it's
Yeah, they do that a lot.
it's like I like that they want to make these final scenarios feel epic in scope, and like I like that they're
Yeah.
keeping this idea of like
A
you're
nice
going
finale, a
to
send off.
yeah, to going to another dimension or fighting something that's like unknowable, and like no one will ever believe you if you told them back home or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think they can do that in one scenario and have a different scenario be the sort of like conclusion or like final like climactic moment of the actual plot of the narrative, right? So like we could have,
Mm-hmm.
and like I don't want to get too much into like design hat, blah blah blah. Let's redesign this as 2 scenarios. But
Sure.
if you have a scenario where you're running around the coterie like trying to get people to vote for you, either by like accosting them and trying to hurt them or like just knock them out and put away your tractors or something like that, and the goal of the scenario is to be like, I'm either going to take over the coterie or I'm going to overthrow the coterie, or I have all
Yeah.
these friends so I can do something proactive towards the next scenario, which is where you go into the outsider dimension to prepare for that. Like that's kind of a cool arc on its own, and it lets it be this like this final moment of like the thing we've been actually engaging with this entire time, which is these coterie members. Um, then, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to keep your secret sudden twist ending, there's outsiders the entire time, then you get to go and engage with this like weird landscape that's also concealed and you have to navigate in a really cool way. I really love the first part of the second part of Congress of Keys, where you're running around and you have the concealed locations and you have to like
Yeah. Yeah.
map out a way through them, and like gradually things start to get changed around, and like suddenly there's 2 concealed locations next to one revealed location, and you're like, wait, one
Yeah.
of those is a mirage. That's not real.
Right.
I love that, and I would have loved to have seen an objective that wasn't just get X amount of clues so you can stop doing that, because that's ultimately what it is like you have to get into the tower and you need a bunch of clues to do that, so go run around
Yeah.
this cool twisting landscape to just do the least interesting things that locations can do, which is be a place to hold clues.
Yes. Okay, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying.
I've had the soapbox long enough. You talk. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, like, you can continue. Wait till your. Is that your final thought, or do you have like more you kind of want
um,
to steal in?
I think like the next part's fine. I think like the trying to assemble the like code of concealed cards is pretty fun, and then trying to kill the thing that's not the Red Glove Man at the top of the tower is like interesting and fun, and a really cool evolution of the concealed mechanics. I just think that section of the campaign or of the scenario could have been its own scenario. That second part of the scenario could have been its own scenario.
Yeah.
That allows you to do something more interesting with the concealed locations in the first part, because you can do it for longer and kind of have that be like the introduction to a scenario rather than like the weird middle part of a scenario.
Yeah. it's like it stops the game in its tracks halfway through and then teaches you how to play the scenario that you're currently in
Yeah.
with all new cards. So it's not just, oh, put these cards away and set up new cards. It's now also learn some nuanced rules that we've not talked about at any point before. And it's just an extension of the concealed mechanic, which is great, but that's the kind of thing that's better at the top of the scenario or after like first, agenda or act card flip and using the cards that are already on the table. It's just, okay, now that you've been playing a little bit, now just add in the concealed cards. Now you can start exploring. There you go. Like, it should have been much more elegant.
Yeah.
I think that's like the big criticism is just it's not an elegant solution for it. I think I push back harder on like the second half. I think what we should do is, like you're saying, split it up into two scenarios and then just shave off that other scenario and put it elsewhere somewhere in the campaign. Maybe that's the secret scenario or whatever like that. I would have been fine with it as a secret scenario. I don't think it should be a mandatory one though, because it just like it just really hurts my entire investment in the story in this campaign and like the thematics. And I almost can't stress that point enough because a lot of people don't like this campaign. I'm hearing more and more it's like bottom tier. And I definitely don't like feel that because I really like this campaign. I like the whole traveling the world bits. I like how the story is included in that. Yeah, it's excessively long, but I still like it. I don't actually think the writing is. I think it's actually pretty decent comparatively with a lot of the other one. Yeah, it's actually at a much higher caliber, so that's refreshing. I like the Foundation, I like the Codier, and I like the limited degree of what we know about them, and I like how they could both feasibly create an argument of like why. I mean, they basically just both want control over the paradimensional element. It's just they want control in different ways.
Yeah,
and they want it as opposed to the other party. They don't want the other party to have it. So I think that creates some interesting choices. I think what I would have done is taken this last scenario, shave off that second half, and then when you do the first half, make it so that you do the debate where people are voting, but then after that, like, you get the interruption or whatever, and then in the scatter, like the Foundation comes in and does a full-on attack. And at that point, you can decide to side with the Foundation and just take out the Codier, or you can actually go with the other people who already voted for you, or the people who haven't. Maybe like you kind of rally up a sort of independent party, and then you kind of enact more like anarchy or whatever against the Foundation. I think either of those options would have been rad, and it would have been like it's almost like two cops and robbers fighting each other kind of, except they're both just trying to vie for power over this particular like subject that neither one can ultimately control. And then you could have a cool like third option where you're like take the keys and you're like, no, like I'm just destroying them because we can't control them or whatever, and so you can go to these locations and then like sabotage the keys or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So I have a couple thoughts on that, but I think the biggest one is that one of the things that I feel like I've heard the most against like this argument of breaking up this last scenario into two scenarios is that there's not enough story beats in that first part. There's not enough in that first part to make its own scenario. But like,
right,
you just described a really nice, fun way to make that scenario more interesting by just like, there's the Foundation. They never actually get a resolution. And honestly,
right.
When you hit the Congress of Keys, when you hit the secret meeting, that's a climactic moment, and it would be a very good moment for the Foundation. Whether you've been trusting them, deceiving them, whatever, they're the ones who told you about this location in the first place.
Right.
They know this is happening. They know something's happening in this location. This would be the moment for them to jump in and be like, nah, we're taking over. And then, you do get to have that sort of, I think it's for the greater good and circle and done moment of like, who do you side with or something like that, or do you try and do your own thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could have that fourth option where you're just trying to escape with your lives. So yeah, there was definitely like all the pieces were there to make that scenario work. And the reason why I bring it up is like I just harp on it so much is that I feel like if that's how they resolve this campaign, my gut instinct tells me that people would like this campaign a heck of a lot more because it's so unsatisfying to be thrust away. It's because it's not just like, oh, focus on something that you probably weren't very invested in throughout the whole campaign, but it's also like taking away, like you said, there's no resolution for the Foundation, so we just don't get to know anything about that.
And the resolution for the coterie is so quick. It's so just like, here, read some text, and then some of them are fighting, but you don't even fight all of them because you do it so quickly. and like the doom
Yeah.
clock enforces that you have to do this quickly. It's yeah.
Right. They'd use the Congress part where you're just reading through everybody, like it's a ton of text, but it doesn't actually accomplish anything because it doesn't determine how they're going to be in play in the game. I mean, in some cases it does, but it just doesn't matter like from a thematic sense. Like so you have an ally or you don't. So you have an enemy or you don't. But like if the Codier, let's say they're all pretty much against you, you're much more tempted to side with the Foundation in
Yeah.
this fight because that's a lot of enemies that you're going to have to try to convince, and it's just easier to have the backing of the Foundation who've already been supporting you, and they have their people they brought along, right? So it will kind of like determine like how much of an uphill battle you're going to have. And I guess I also think it would have worked better too because when you compare with stuff like Forgotten Age, like do you want like snake people or like alien people? It's like what? Like
Yeah.
it's weird that that campaign tries to like push you in directions because every time I go through it, I'm just like I don't know what they're about. I don't know what they're interested in. It's just like it's
But
totally irrelevant to
you're
me.
right. You're
And
right. These are both human forces that you're deciding between, and like I think that's something that sort of happens in Circle Undone a little bit as well. But this feels much more relatable because you've developed relationships with these individual coterie members, with your
right.
Foundation handler or Agent Flint if you still have Agent Flint. Like there's ways you
Hmm.
can kind of make these relationships a lot more solid, which I think Forgotten Age had, and that's kind of why. Like you have Iktaka
Yeah.
and Alejandra that you can develop relationships with throughout that campaign. But this just has more characters that you can be like, no, I want to be on this side. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I also think, and this is a criticism of the campaign. I've only gone through it twice, but I feel like it's way too hard to understand the Foundation. Like, there's story characters, there's like three of them that you can recruit and get on your team at some point. I've not gotten a single one, and I've gone through the campaign twice. Like,
yeah,
it's like so secretive with how you find stuff, and that's fine. I get that's part of the theme, but it sort of just ends up meaning that I just don't know enough about the Foundation when I get to the end of the story every
yeah.
time because it's like you've buried it so deep, and it's
Well,
like
and
okay,
yeah, and some spoilers for you, I guess, is that two of those three characters you can get aren't actually the Foundation. Like one's Flint, who's
okay,
pretty much openly against the Foundation when we meet him, and the other one's just a scientist you can recruit. But she's not really a part of the Foundation. She just has been like noticing that things are disappearing.
weird,
Yeah. So the Foundation does not get like the same treatment, and I think what this is probably meant to evoke is like, hey, we're doing that choose a side thing, but actually the Foundation's not a side you can choose, and but then like the awkward thing is ultimately the outsiders aren't really a side you can choose, and
yeah,
also you are kind of becoming friends with coterie members throughout the campaign, so you end up
right.
really not choosing a side.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah. I mean, it would have been cool if, let's say, you did break it up into two. If you did this scenario, the first half, and you settle the dispute with the human characters, and you figure out who you're on alignment with and who you take over, then you could do the final scenario, which would be the one in space where you're dealing with the outsiders and whatever. And you go into that with your team, whether
Yeah,
that's the Codier, the Foundation, or whoever. Like they're going to be backing you, and then that kind of changes the narrative of how that one goes a little bit.
yeah.
And they kind of then they're like go and make a power play, and then maybe and maybe they're both greedy. Like maybe just regardless of who you side with, they're just like, oh, I just want the power, and then you have to like turn your back on them in the last moment or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
I don't know.
mean,
I'm just throwing stuff at the
we're
wall.
literally just
Yeah.
spitballing here. We're not trying to redesign this campaign. We're just being like, why isn't it? Why is it this way? Why is it kind of shortchanging this like human aspect of the campaign?
Yeah, that's the part that I just can't understand. And I feel like it is worth mentioning and going over because I think it just like changes your entire perception of the whole campaign. Because like you're emotionally invested in certain elements, and when
Yeah,
there's like the payoff is like for something that wasn't really invested in, and then there's no real payoff for the things I was, it just is like, well, why did we play this scenario? Is what you kind of end up with.
yeah,
Like the scenario itself is fun, and I like the mechanics for the whole thing. It's just that narratively it doesn't like connect well, and this is where it's most important, right?
yeah.
Because it's the finale. And I think that's also why it's in this state that it is, because the designers maybe go into it with this like super high expectation. And like scaling it down is not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
I mean, Dead Heat is like super self-contained. It doesn't care about the rest of the campaign
Well,
very much.
most of the
and that's
scenarios
good.
are. Most of the scenarios, I think, are these very
Yeah.
self-contained moments of like, this is a person with a strange power. Do
Yeah.
we want to try and take that power, or do we want to try and help them? Basically, that's kind of like, it's very picaresque, right? It's very much just like you're on a journey helping people. It's just that when that comes to a conclusion, it falls a little short because they have to have this moment of big monster thing, and also, did you help everyone, right? Like, or did you interact with everyone,
Yeah.
which you can't really do. And I mean, like, I want to echo what you're saying. This is a good scenario. This is a fun scenario. There's lots of really good bits in it. I just wish we had it as two scenarios so that we could get more narratively. We could be rewarded for our narrative investment in certain characters before having to like deal with the big bad evil guy.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And honestly, I don't even think it would have been that many more cards to print, because you probably would have needed a couple more locations for the Cotier location.
Yeah.
But that's about it, because the other one had plenty.
Yeah.
Probably has more than enough, frankly. And
Honestly,
then you have all the Cotier members, so they're already there. You need to repurpose those other ally cards so that they're actual Foundation members, so that they represent a side and you can get their perspective and you can be allied with them. I think that's important too. Yeah, I don't know. They want to create these moral dilemmas where you're like, ooh, who do you choose? But I just feel like every time that happens, I just don't feel like I have enough information, or it's like the choice itself is like bonkers. I'm like, I'm not going to make a choice here. Like, I don't like, do I want snake people or alien people? Like, just going back to that one, it's like, what? Do I want the Foundation of the Cotier in control of the paranormal things? I'm like, I don't know enough about the Foundation. Even if I did, it's just humans like taking control of these things they don't understand. That's all it is. Like, but if they added depth and I got to learn about the characters and they explained a little bit more about what their intended purpose of it was, and then that becomes the central conflict that they disagree over, then like you got a story there, and that's something I could get behind. So.
Exactly, and
I think it's just go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is why Forgotten Age works, is because you get invested in Ictaka and Alejandro, mostly Ictaka.
Yeah,
and you're like, you want me to choose snake people, so, and I like you, so I'm just gonna kind of trust you on this. So I guess go snake people. Even though,
exactly.
Even though like it's an impossible moral dilemma, you're like, but this character that it isn't an impossible decision for is making this choice, and I like this character, so I can kind of be like, yep, we're going with this choice.
You have a thread. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess part of the frustration too with this one is this one does have more pressure as an ultimate scenario than other campaigns, because you go the whole world and then everything's going to come together in this one central point. So I guess, to be fair, maybe go easy on it a little bit, in the sense that it's having to do quite a bit. It's a shame that it doesn't meet that expectation, but also like the final scenario in Dunwich is a lot better, but also like the stakes are much more clearly defined. You're just adapting the one story. You've got like pretty good material to work off of, in the sense that like it has a very obvious directory of where you're going, and so you just go and you do the things, and you just need to make sure the scenario is competent enough, and then etc. So I don't know. I don't really have much more to say. I'm glad we talked about it.
Yeah, but I'm glad we had this conversation and kind of talked about, like, I guess what our expectations were for this scenario versus like what ended up happening, and like kind of how they could have been meshed, or what could have been. Even though like we're not advocating for an errata for this scenario that's like, actually it's two scenarios. We're just thinking about how that could have happened, what that would have looked like. The last thing I want to talk about is something that I actually don't think has anything to do with this conversation, but it's just about the cool interaction between Wish Eater and that one guy. That
Oh
was
yeah, what was it again?
uh,
He needs to draw a symbol token to then get an effect, right?
no. It was so Wish Eater is if you draw a symbol token, you can cancel that symbol token, spend a charge
Right.
from it,
Yeah.
and heal. He
Hmm.
was I could just move money to him and then move. I don't remember his name. I only had him for one scenario.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
And then he had like you could just dump like
I
all
could dump a
those
bunch of
charges.
resources on him, like, three at a time, and then dump a bunch of resources on Wish Eater as well. And oh man,
It infinite wheat.
that
Yeah,
was really cool,
that was awesome.
especially because holy crap, that Chaos Bag was actually mean to us. That was the meanest a Chaos Bag has ever been to us, I think. So
Yeah,
there were like
it was
three or
nasty.
four situations where I used that would have lost the failed the test, was a critical test. We had already
Hmm.
failed like I think we drew like five or six autofills this scenario or something crazy like that. And then like by
Hmm.
that point the cultists were -5 and there was four of them in there. So it was just like me and Chaos back, and then Wish Eater showed up and was like, "I got you," and sometimes it didn't because that's how it happens. Yeah,
Yeah, that was pretty hilarious.
I guess
Like, holy cow.
the only other thing I want to say is I'm not actually mad about this, but we did lose this scenario, and we ended up losing the campaign because of it. We were like
That was unfortunate.
an action shy and had failed so many tests, so I don't think it was really on our decks. I mean, it was kind of on our decks. We
No.
could have built them, I guess, to pass more tests. I could have taken Mark Harrigan instead of. Could I have? We don't have Mark Harrigan.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could have done like we could have done so many things, but yeah, we played well enough to earn a
Yeah,
victory for sure.
I think
And
we
it's
did.
just game being mean,
What was the game beating
but
me?
yeah,
And I think it was an
it is what
Ancient
it
Evils
is.
too, wasn't it? Wasn't it like?
Yeah, it was Ancient Evils. That's
Yeah,
all. That's all it was. We just needed to not pull Ancient Evils,
yeah.
and then we would have had
And then
him
we did.
down.
Yeah,
Like I was like, oh, we have all the pieces. He's done, and then nope.
yeah. So that was a letdown, but it was still a cool. I think it was still a cool. It was a letdown that I don't feel like I faulted the game too much, or I faulted us for, and I was like, I can just fault the game for this one. That's fine.
This is distinctly different from the last progression challenge because we've lost most of these campaigns, but I guess you're right in terms of like overall, it's like a shame that this one has to go down as a loss when it's very clearly not, and we're gonna just be
Yeah,
harping on that probably for many years to come as we continue to play progression challenge
this
because
one
it's like
this one should
like
have been a
on a
win.
moral level, on any sensible person can look and like, yeah, you guys won, you had it. Like there was nothing the game could have done. We even like pulled the next few tokens from the bag and was like, yeah, he's dead. Like
Yeah, yeah. Oh well. It's like a win in my
whatever,
book because
whatever. Yeah,
you
same.
like Dead Heat now, so that's all that really matters. So
It's
okay,
our show. We won it.
yeah, we won it. A couple of things. So because the resolution of this of whether you win or lose actually doesn't matter for what campaign we're going to next. It's what
Yeah,
happened
for
with the
our purposes
coterie.
because we've cleared a lot of campaigns
Yeah.
already. So
And
mhm.
the actual condition of like the deciding factor of where you go next depends on like what happened with the coterie vote because I think we felt that was an important part that wasn't getting highlighted in this last scenario.
Hmm.
So we escaped the coterie, which means we would go to the Dunwich Legacy. However, since we've already played that, we just go to the next one in release order, which is Circle Undone. I'm gonna just
Yep.
hit this button now. Okay, so yeah, next up we have Circle Undone, and we have a preview of the decks we're going to be playing. We had 16 experience at the end of the campaign,
16. Yeah.
so we ended up
So we
using.
both bought a new investigator to play,
Yep,
and then we used the rest to get the story cards from Fortune and Folly.
yeah, and we'll have a video that kind of breaks that down and what our decisions are on that next week, depending on when this comes out. Why do I make
Yeah,
promises?
it should be next week.
Right, I think so.
Who knows?
Who knows? Um,
Yeah. So we're going to be playing Amina Zidane and Mandy Thompson. That's the game plan for this one.
mhm.
And obviously, Mandy will be the fighter. No, I'm just kidding. Amina
No.
will be the fighter.
We're Mystic Fighter people here.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes. But it is. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit through your deck because I think a lot of my deck was in reaction to what you were doing on your deck a little bit. So.
Yes, so I'm going to be playing Amina this time, so I will be the Mystic Fighter. And the reason I'm playing her is for Circle Undone, I just want to play a Mystic. I'm not comfortable. I've played it before as I did. What's her name? Okay, so I let me give background on the campaign because I feel like this actually matters a little bit. I've not actually finished this campaign. I played it once as Agnes for the League of Extraordinary Investigators, and I did that blind and was getting destroyed because I was doing it blind and didn't know what I was up against, and so that went over very poorly. And I think I dropped out somewhere around the midpoint. Then I played it again as Min, and I was doing my the testless deck where you just never investigate, you just get clues naturally. Otherwise, you would test very big. Because I was trying to avoid the haunted, and that was fun. But then I did Wages of Sin, and that kind of ruined my fun, and so I stopped playing when that happened. So I still maintain that I should probably stay as a Mystic because there's plenty of willpower treacheries to go around, and so I want to make sure I have someone who can competently handle that. And there's also very high Doom thresholds here. So Amina, I'm not going to feel quite as panicky about playing a Doom deck because I'll have plenty of opportunities to get rid of it. That is the theory. That is the hope that we're riding on. And I don't think Amina is very good. On paper, she seems quite terrible. But Mandy's very good, so we're not going to worry about it.
And that's why Mandy's here. Yeah, my deck stipulation, the challenge that I put for myself in building this deck was actually try. So
It was actually try.
That's where we're at. I'm going to be playing Mandy Thompson. I don't play a lot of Seekers, but when I do, I guess I play ones that have 50 card decks. Yeah, and I think one of the things I really actually appreciate about this deck is that I can just put any cards in here because there's so much room for deck in this deck. And I don't know, I feel like I'm just getting to play with like a bunch of cards that I don't normally play with because I don't normally play Seeker, and I don't really play that much Survivor either. So I just get to kind of play with a bunch of cards that haven't really done a thing yet. Some notable like kind of archetypes I'm kind of playing into. I am playing with the clue drop, using the research notes to get evidence and test at 0 to get clues back off that locations. Dr. William T. Millison to cancel treachery cards because I feel like that's going to be important in Circle Undone. I've played.
Well, and also too, if you're thinking to yourself, if I can interrupt, like, oh no, you're dropping clues on haunted locations. But when you use research notes, you test on the research notes itself, not the location.
Not the location.
So you don't have to worry about haunted. So it's actually quite clever.
I'm a little bit clever this time. What else is going on in this deck? Oh, I have so I splashed into Survivor, and the main reason for that is because this campaign likes to split you up. And though Amina Zidane is a very competent fighter, I don't think she's competent enough to snipe guys in locations she cannot get to in the first scenario of the campaign. So I did take some cards like Mind Over Matter, or Survival Instinct, and Act of Desperation to just sort of take care of some of those enemies that might come up my way before Amina can get to me to help me out with that. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, the other thing you also have going for you is there's a little bit of a hint there with making preparations. It's the dilemmas. Because you got such a big deck, you can just kind of choose when you want to pull them out, right?
Yeah, that was something that I definitely thought about. Since I'll be searching my deck, because Mandy Thompson's ability is all about searching your deck, I figured I can actually decide when to play dilemmas. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I've had this thought before with friends in low places in Preston and ended up hating it. But I'll never learn, so...
I mean, kudos for giving it a second attempt.
Yeah, I think I'm excited too. And I think, like, playing across from Amina instead of Marie, this is sounding more and more like I'm going insane. Actually, well, okay, Amina has a very flat stat line, and, like, it's in making preparations, defense especially, that means you're going to be going from a 3-3-3-3 to a 4-4-2-2 in some way with that card. I think Mandy can definitely take losing a point in intellect or losing a point in fist because she has such an optimized stat line to give Amina a slightly better stat line based on reactions. So there's definitely some thoughts with that. And then I guess the other thing that's going on in this deck, because there's not enough going on in this deck, is I'm doing Archaic Glyphs in Ravenquill, although I don't think I'm doing Ravenquill on Archaic Glyphs. I think I'm doing it on research notes. And Shrewd Analysis, because I realized we only have access to 2 of the upgraded Archaic Glyphs, and I would take either of them.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, it seems like a pretty solid deck. I mean, Mandy's a powerhouse, so I think you're going to do just fine. The only slight thing that's annoying about Mandy is that when you do in your search, especially if you do like Research Librarian right away, then you end up inevitably having to deal with your treachery by like... And then like people say like, oh, but you get to choose when it pings, and I've played Mandy, and being able to choose when it pings doesn't really help that much. It's still a bad effect. I still have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely one that I'm not excited to deal with, but those Research Librarians, I need to be able to find my research notes, and if I need to find my shocking discovery before I can find my research notes, I'll deal with an extra treachery card. It sucks, but I think actually in Circle Undone the treacheries they combo off each other a lot more, so I'm not as worried about the encounter deck for a single card. It's just if I'm doing more and more and more of those, that gets a little bit scary.
Right, but you should only have to hit Shocking Discovery once because your deck is so huge.
Yeah.
So it would be really unusual, I think, for you to hit it twice. So yeah, I do think this is also agreed that this is the kind of campaign where it's not that big a deal to just pull up an extra treachery into a threat area. Like, yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't do anything right now. So that actually buffers the punishment that she would ordinarily have to suffer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was well chosen. I think there's actually a lot of strategic reasons why she fits here.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing we should talk about is what's following us from the Scarlet Keys into the Circle Undone. And that is that a big boss monster is going to get a key, and we're going to get a key that we kind of share between the two of us. So for this campaign, since we're playing Circle Undone, we decided we're going to give the Spectral Watcher. Not the Sanguine Watcher, even though also wears red. We're going to give that friend the Eye of Ravens when it shows up, and we're going to shuffle in the treacheries from Scarlet Keys that have enemies shift their attached keys, and there's another one that like attaches to coterie enemies, and we're going to give the Spectral Watcher the coterie enemy trait for this campaign. So basically, this is just another...
You just made the Spectral Watcher way, way worse than he already was.
Yeah, and a part of the coterie. So that's cool. And then to compensate for that, we're also giving ourselves the Last Blossom or Wellspring of Fortune. I don't think we've decided which one yet, but one of the keys that we accumulated from the campaign will follow us and belong to both of us. We'll both be the bearer of it. We can both interact with it, which isn't too difficult because keys usually affect the entire team and not just one person. So,
yeah. And as like a, I guess, follow up to like how Amina fits into all that, like with the deck choices I have here, it's mostly just a ton of offensive stuff and a ton of hand slots, but the deck is going to look very differently as soon as I get some XP. So there is like a method to the madness, and I'm hoping to pull off what I'm intending to with it, but it's like, here we go. I mean, it's one of those exercises where it's like you have a kind of terrible investigator, and then you go, okay, how do we make this investigator work? Sort of a Lola scenario. I mean, I don't know if she's quite as bad as Lola, but like, she's not like, she has a great ability. That's like the best thing about her is like, you can just, it saves a huge problem that Mystics have of just not having enough resources. And then she gets it for Doom, but like, there are ways in Mystic to get rid of Doom. So, you know, there's tons of potential in that. It's just she's nerfed in every other sense of the word. So, yeah. Don't get attached to it, but I just packed every combat option I could think of just so I could just beat the crap out of anything that shows up, and then I'll let you get all the clues because I can only invest in one thing.
You got String of Curses. It's probably fine. Oh, something I changed since I actually showed you this is you can see that my events are slightly out of order alphabetically. That's because I've been editing the slide for a couple days now. But Seeking Answers is in this deck now, which neat tech for Circle and Dun's first scenario. Though we cannot enter locations that are in front of each other, they are still connected, so I can help you get clues off your locations with Seeking Answers.
Interesting. Okay. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking to myself, in out of your 50 card deck.
I search it like all the time. There's so much searching going on. Tons of searching.
Right. Well, I mean, it'll be fun to like switch roles once again, and I'm just gonna twiddle around, get my weapons up, kill things, and wait, and I'll let you fiddle with all the clues.
It's gonna be fantastic. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. It'll be fun to actually play this campaign all the way to the end.
Yeah,
I've not yet done that yet, so
that's
it'll be rewarding to finally do that.
I am excited for that as well because I like the ending of this campaign. I think it's got a really good ending. So yeah, looking forward.
Yeah, I hear the final scenario is very, very good, and so yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, I think that's everything for this video. There may be a gap week that we have before gameplay comes back out where we talk about pricing cards from Fortune and Folly and do our card reviews of the first deluxe box of Circle and Done. I don't know what that looks like yet because as we're recording this video, we're just starting to put videos back on the channel.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll see you soon. You'll see us soon. Don't you worry. And until then,
stay out of danger.